Good afternoon, Mr. McKeever. Your witness is Mr. Romeo, is that right?
Correct.
Good afternoon, Mr. Romeo. As you understand, you're about to be asked questions by Mr. McKeever, who's sitting opposite you. But first of all, I understand you're willing to take the oath.
Yes.
Sitting where you are, could you raise your right hand and repeat these words after me? I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that I will tell the truth,
that I will tell the truth,
the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much, Mr. Romeo. Now, I don't know how long your evidence will take. We've scheduled for about 2 hours until 4 o'clock. But if at any stage you want to take a break, just give an indication to me and we can take a break. For whatever reason, just give me an indication. Now, Ms. McKeever.
Could you tell the inquiry your name, please?
It's Thomas Romeo.
And what's your present occupation?
I'm a taxi owner operator.
And who do you work for?
Myself.
And where do you do that?
Glasgow.
Now, you've signed a witness statement for the inquiry, is that correct?
That's correct.
And are you content to adopt that witness statement as your evidence today?
Yes, I am.
Now, we're particularly interested in your history at Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Glasgow. But I think your history with the NHS extends either side of the time that you were involved with the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Is that correct?
That's correct.
When did you start working for the NHS?
I think it was 2011 at the Glasgow Royal Infirmary.
And when did you stop working for the NHS?
November 2019.
Right. As regards the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, when did you join that hospital?
Joined that was probably November 2014.
And what was the job at that time?
It was estates duty manager.
And I gather that you were there until around March or April of 2018, is that right?
That's correct.
And did your job change during that period?
Yes, it did.
What did it change to?
Well, it changed from a duty manager, which entails shift work, to just estates manager, which was just normal day shift.
Was the substance of the two jobs similar? Did they change at all, or was it just the timing?
No, they changed because the duty manager was more reactive to breakdowns, etc. Whereas the day shift estates manager was doing reactive kind of calls as well as doing PPMs, that's planned preventative maintenance on equipment.
Right. And it was the estates manager job that you did at the end of your time at the QEH that involved both of those?
Correct.
Were you working across the whole hospital in your time there?
Just when I was a duty manager, after a certain time at night, I think it was about 4 o'clock at night, I think, or something, you covered the whole site.
What parts of the hospital did you cover when you were the estates manager?
Queen Elizabeth itself. And on occasions, the children as well. Depends as if, like the ventilation that crossed over or the water that crossed over, you had to react to them.
And can you recall when you made the move across from being duty manager to being estates manager?
I thought it was June 2017. However, when I seen Dennis Kelly's oral hearing yesterday, and it was now May 2017.
All right, thank you. How did your roles at QEH compare to previous jobs you'd done at the NHS?
Well, it differed from the Glasgow Royal Infirmary because there was a supervisor when I left there. Then when I moved on to the REH in Paisley, it was the same job as Queen Elizabeth at the later stage.
But does it follow from that there wasn't a supervisor for you when you reached Queen Elizabeth?
I wasn't. I was a estates manager when I went to.
Sorry, you were the supervisor.
Oh, sorry, I was the supervisor. Yes, I just get promotion.
My mistake. Thank you.
Yep.
And how did your job at the Queen Elizabeth compare with that previous job in terms of what you did?
You multiply it by 3.
Okay, you mentioned in your statement that when you got there, you were part of an entirely new team. I don't think you knew anybody that you were working with.
That's correct.
Who did you report to?
At that time, it was Ian Powdery.
I'm going to ask you some general questions about your roles at the Queen Elizabeth, but I do appreciate from what you've told me that you had 2 distinct jobs during your time there. So if the answer is different for those 2 jobs, just explain that.
Yes.
First question is, when you were carrying out work, how did tasks come to you?
At the very early stages, it was because it wasn't totally occupied, the hospital, it came straight from potentially Ian Powdery.
And that was before occupation?
Yeah, yes.
And when you say occupation, when do you mean?
Probably from 2014 to 2015, I think. I think it was early 2015, I think, it opened. Then the responsibilities changed to, I'm trying to think, it was David Baratti. I think it was David Baratti then.
Just to try and get the dates clear, you say you started around the end of 2014.
That's correct.
The site was taken possession of in January 2015.
That's correct.
And the first patients went in around perhaps April of that year. Would that be correct?
Yes, that'd be correct, yes.
Right. So you mentioned having worked to Ian Powdery, first of all. What period would that have been?
That'd have been just before probably April, up until April, until the migration.
Okay, and then after April, would you been?
With David Baratti then.
And when would you be reporting to him? Until when?
He retired. I can't remember the dates he retired. I think it was probably 2017 sometime.
And who did you work to after that?
Well, it was probably Colin Purdon, but however, he had his own responsibilities, so he was just filling in until they got someone in David's place.
Okay, thank you. What sort of tasks were allocated to you?
At the early stages, I was doing purging of the. It was the pendants in the theatres and in the
Did you say
ICU.
You said purging?
Purging, yes, that's
Explain
putting air through something. Just to for that case, it was to remove water droplets from the hoses, so that it doesn't, because you put, it's actually medical gas. It could be nitrous as well. It could be anything. So you had to make sure there was no water droplets in it. So I had to purge them out. It was over a 2-week period, 5 days. Then it would get tested by the QC. Another 5 days, it would get tested again. That was like a suppose, a validation. That it was good to use.
Can I, just so that I'm keeping up, Mr. Romeo, what system are you purging?
Oh, sorry, medical gases.
Medical gases.
Yeah, apologise.
Sorry, Ms. McKeown.
And that would have been the first task that you were engaged on at the Queen Elizabeth?
That would be the first task, I think, yeah.
And from your memory, that would have been around 2 weeks' worth of work?
Yes, that one, yes.
And then you would have gone on after that to do
something else.
Something else. What might that something else have been?
Well, it's to fit televisions to every room in the adults. So I can't remember, was that 1,300 rooms or something? I can't remember.
Okay.
But not by me. I wasn't doing it. I was just managing the process.
Right. Okay. Well, explain to me what you were actually doing in terms of managing the process.
Well, I was locking off a supply to the. It's like a partition above the bed. where all the services go, like medical gases, etc., and sockets. So I was isolating the supply to this beading, so the contractor would come in and fit. It's like an angle. It was like an angle poised light, but it had a television on it, basically.
Okay, but you weren't actually screwing in the back.
No.
I
I
was
no.
What were you doing?
I was managing the process.
Okay, so bringing people in to do that work.
Correct.
Okay. Well, I say bringing people in, but were you bringing people? Yeah.
Yes, I was bringing people in. Yes.
Okay.
That was all. I didn't arrange it. It was all being arranged by senior managers. I don't know who did it or what, but I was just there to facilitate the job being carried out.
Okay, so after fitting TVs, what might your next task have been?
At that time, it took me on to the migration, but at that time you'd be getting our own jobs. We'd be becoming duty managers then, which means we're doing shift work. And that was solely reactive to things not working properly. I wouldn't say breaking down, but things not working properly. And it wasn't always equipment's fault, you know.
Yeah, no, I understand. What sort of things?
Well, like the kind of, call it pneumatic system that took blood from a ward to the lab. If the lid of it wasn't screwed, I don't know if anybody's ever seen them. Have you seen these pods? Have you never seen them?
I haven't. No.
They're about that size. By that, you know, that's their cylinders, and they go through. It's all done by vacuum. It goes through from one area to another area.
Okay.
It could be blood samples, and then it goes to the lab, and it comes back with the test results. So they would break down.
So fixing those.
Yeah, well, not fixing them. We could do what we could do, but sometimes we had to phone down to somewhere like, I don't know if it was Belgium or something. If we couldn't fix it, to a technician in there that couldn't really help us.
Okay, so you've told us about 3 different tasks. They're not similar tasks at all. These 3 televisions, pneumatic tubes.
Yeah, that's correct. Yes.
And did it go on like this?
Well, the pneumatic system did.
No,
yes.
What I mean is, did it go on like this? There was no rhyme or reason to the tasks that you might be allocated.
No, we just needed fixed or needed reset or something. We just had to just multitask on different pieces of equipment.
And how did these tasks actually come to you? Who would allocate them to you?
With the help desk, and also through FM First as well.
And your actual role might be to get your hands dirty and try fixing these things, or it might be arranging for other people to do that.
Well, we're pressing buttons, yes, on the computer. Sometimes we did the pneumatic system to try and open gates, etc., to stop blockages. Sometimes it was successful, sometimes it wasn't.
Again, just so that I'm keeping up, you mentioned that you would get a prompt to do something, either from the help desk or a FM First. Now, I think we've heard about FM First. That's a facilities management software?
That's correct, my lord, yes.
Right. And are you still talking about reacting to something that's not working?
Correct.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, well, the other side of that coin is, how were these tasks and their completion recorded?
On FM First.
All on FM First. One of the things you mentioned at the start was that the job was partly, I think, attending to breakages, things going wrong, and partly planned preventative maintenance. Is that correct?
That's been the one to day shift, yes, as just estates manager, yes.
Right, so PPM didn't enter your work stream until 2017.
That's correct.
I'll perhaps come on to that later, but just at this point, from your perspective, were those 2 different types of tasks? Or was it all part of one work stream?
Probably 2 different tasks.
Were there differences in the way that matters were allocated to you in terms of PPM and allocated to you in terms of firefighting?
Yeah, the firefighting was done through the help desk and FM First, and the PPMs. When I went on the day shift, they were all set up. I just continued what was there. There was a lot of work went into that, you know, for spreadsheets, etc., and all that. Especially for the air handling units. and also the flushing and sampling and testing of critical care areas. That's water.
Okay, so perhaps explain a little bit more about that. When there was PPM that required to be done, how would you know that it had to be done?
When we looked at the SHTM, for ventilation it was 0301, and when you looked at the SHTM, I don't know, I didn't set this up, it was all set up when I wanted this.
No, I'm interested in your perspective. When you went in the morning and there was a PPM task that might require to be done, how would you know that?
Can you go on the FM first and look?
And does it follow from what you've told me that the matter would be on FM first because it had been allocated to that by a spreadsheet that someone else had set up?
Well, somebody, I think you could, an FM first, I think you could put them in and it would automatically generate. I think it was whenever it was set up. So whoever set it up could generate it, or it would generate it automatically. Maybe a month, 3 months, and 6 months. It would automatically generate the jobs. You'd have to go in as the estates manager and allocate the jobs to a technician. So they would get it through their PDA. I think you've heard of that terminology, haven't you? PDA.
Explain to me.
Well, it's a handheld device like a phone.
Okay.
And it's got a software in it, FM First software. And when you put the PPM, it just transfers from your station, your computer, down to the phone. And that's him get the job. He opens the job up, signs on, does the job, then signs it back off again. With a wee note, a wee caveat note, if anything goes wrong or anything that was unpeculiar, not normal, he would write that in the wee notes. Then we'd have to go in and check all these as well to see if there's any issues.
Okay, so in principle, you're describing a fairly straightforward, or what ought to be a fairly straightforward system. Matters would make their way onto FM first because either the help desk or the spreadsheet, the automatic generator, had allocated them to FM first. You would log into FM first and see that there were tasks, and then you'd distribute them to technicians or whoever. Is that right?
That's correct. But also the wards could do it as well. If the ward or department had an issue with any piece of equipment, they could just raise the job himself. And then we would have to, there's probably, the supervisor would do it initially. And I would probably give them a hand during the day if they were too busy, and just allocate the jobs to whatever technician that was most qualified to do the job.
Okay, but in that kind of 3-layer system of tasks being generated, management in the middle to do the allocating, and technicians actually doing the work, your tasks are all in the middle tier. Is that fair?
Yes, that's correct, yes.
Okay, you're not generating the tasks yourself, is what I mean.
I could. I could
Tell
generate.
me in what circumstances you might do that.
If a ward phones me up with a department for some kind of incident that's happened and they say that I've not been trained in FM first, and I would raise a job for them on their behalf. Or maybe their system might be down. I would raise a job for them as well.
Okay, would you be actively looking around the hospital for things that needed to be done so that you could enter them onto FM first yourself?
Well, if I was doing my walk around what I normally did during my shift, if I seen something, yeah. I've certainly when you walk by something needed done.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned, I think, your background, or you may not have mentioned your background. I may have picked up from the questionnaire, but can you just tell us what your background was before coming into the NHS?
It was electrical.
Electrical engineering, I think.
Well, qualified apprenticeship and also a HNC in electrical engineering. They gave me a technician's position when I was on the tools at the Glasgow Royal Infirmary.
And you've said in your statement that you consider that to be very relevant to the job that you ended up doing at QEH. Is that correct?
There's electricity involved in everything.
Now, there are other systems other than the electrical ones involved at hospital. I'd like to ask you a bit about that. Specifically interested in your training. It's the water system, the ventilation system, and dealing with infection control. They're the 3 areas I'm interested in. So my question is really, how extensive was your training, firstly, on water matters?
Just the only thing I had was Legionella familiarisation. That every member of staff in NHS has got to attend that course. I think it's I can't remember how often you've got to sit it, but you've got to go. It's a mandatory training you've got to do.
Can you remember when you did that, or where?
2012.
So that wouldn't have been at Queen Elizabeth.
No.
That would have been at where,
No.
the Royal?
Yes.
Okay. What about the same question in relation to ventilation matters? How much training on that?
I did a CP course for ventilation because I was a supervisor at the Glasgow Royal Infirmary, just so that I could interpret the readings that the chaps were getting back when they're doing their PPMs.
What does the CP course involve?
That's a competent persons course. It gave you a familiarisation of the air handling unit itself and how you'd safely isolate it, change filters, adjust set points and all that, and pre and post filters, differential pressures. It was just familiarisation for myself, because I never ever did the task. But when I gave that task to someone to do, I had an understanding of what the job entailed.
Was that a more detailed type of training than the one you described for the water training?
Oh yeah, it's a City and Guilds qualification.
Right. What does CP stand for?
Competent person.
Thank you.
Sorry, my lord.
No, it's my job to keep up.
And lastly, I mentioned infection control. What training did you have on that?
I'm sure that was just a class-based training as well. I think I'm not too sure on that, to be honest with you. But I'm sure if I got it, I'd have got it at the Glasgow Royal Infirmary. Because I remember one occasion we did about maybe 7 or 8 in one day. They weren't particularly long.
Okay, would that have been intensive, or is that not the right word?
Oh, it was intensive doing 8 of them, yeah.
Well, in terms of the detail of the amount of training that you had, would that be more than the water, less than the water, more than the ventilation, less than the ventilation? Just
it was less than the ventilation. That's for sure. Probably the same as water.
And did you get any further training on those during your time at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital?
Well, the training I got was probably from the infection control. If I was doing a particular job and I wasn't quite sure how the infection control would see the job, well, see, a risk assessment was to be carried out for it, and a method statement. That's what the kind of infection control scribe is anyway. Basically, you would ask your advice. How does that sit? Are you happy with that or not? And they would give you, it's kind of like ongoing training, because things change all the time. You've got to change with it, risk assessment wise.
Okay, when you're talking about training, are we talking about actual courses that you've attended?
No. It's just verbally,
Okay. When you combine all of that, would you have considered, looking back, that to have been adequate training for the types of roles that you were asked to perform when you were at the hospital?
No. But it probably was for some members of staff, but certainly not managerial, I wouldn't imagine it would be.
Do you know whether that was a common opinion that was had about people at your level?
I don't really know, to be honest with you. That's probably something I didn't discuss, if I'm being honest with you, but I think we all had the same level of knowledge and understanding. So you didn't very often. I mean, we were that busy. You didn't have much time to talk to anyone.
Well, that was going to be my question. Did you have much time to think about that at the time, or the fact, or when I'm asking the question now, is this you retrospectively?
Yes.
Okay. Can you think of any occasions when you were conscious of the fact that I don't have enough training here, or my state knowledge is not up to scratch?
Absolutely, yes.
Can you give me an example of that? Perhaps an example relating to water would be what I'd be most interested in.
Well, that's the one, yeah. And when I moved on to day shift, I became more involved in some water PPMs. But I think I was only involved in, was it the flushing, sampling and testing of the critical care areas within the adult and the children's hospital.
Okay, explain to me the scenario and your thoughts about it.
Well, I didn't have any background in water at all. And when I went on to the day shift, I think, if my memory serves me right, it was the NHS, the state staff that were doing it. And when I seen what was getting back, I wasn't particularly happy with it. The format it was coming back, and even the people who were doing it, I think they're only apprentices at the time, and you might think they're only flushing, they're only testing, and they're sending it away for that. But it's not as simple as that, you know. Every job's got its complexity, you know, whether it's large or small. There's ways of doing things, and I got DMA Canyon in to do the sampling for me. But I don't know, ulterior motive there, I'm being honest with you, because I was, any other works I was getting in, they were doing it.
Okay,
They're the experts.
right.
I think this is my fault. You were asked if there was any examples of where you felt that your training was not sufficient for what you were being asked to do. Now, if I heard you correctly, you first gave the example of flushing, and then I think you moved to sampling. Is that
correct? That's right.
Could you maybe just tease out, first of all, in relation to flushing, what are we talking about, and how you felt perhaps you needed more training?
I actually wasn't doing the flushing. It's actually me turning the tap on for the length of most of the time. But I've got to be able to understand what the results that come back are, so we can take the appropriate action. To see if the results are out of specification, then I've got to take action on that to make sure they do comply. So you've got to run the tap for a length of time. Well, that's for the flushing. But if you're doing the sampling and testing, it's called a pre and post flush. It's pre and post sample.
Right. This is partly where I was having difficulty.
All right.
Are we talking about one task or two separate
tasks?
tasks?
It's two separate tasks.
Okay.
Flushing's one task on its own.
Right.
And then the next two tasks are linked.
Right.
One's a pre-flush. One's a sort of pre-test. You take the sample straight from the tap as you arrive in the area you're going to be testing. Then you run it for 2 minutes. Then you take another sample. Then you label.
No.
Then you label them up. Pre and post, and all the details of the ward, because there's at every sink, if my memory serves me right, there was a wee kind of number on it, and that gave you the room, but also gave the room plus the number, and that signified where the samples came from.
Right. The actual sampling, was that done by GGC staff, or was it done by contractors?
Initially, before even when I was on day shift for a couple of months, it was NHS staff who did that.
Right. And your concern, I take it, was you would not actually be personally taking the samples, but you felt you did not have the training to supervise or manage that task. I mean, have I got that? Just tell me if I'm wrong.
Slightly wrong in a sense, because I could read the SHTM 0401 to find out what the readings should be.
Right.
But my main concern was the test being carried out properly by the people who were doing it.
Right.
And I could probably interpret the results I was getting back and take appropriate action. But I had to make sure from the SHTM that I was doing that for the water.
Right. So, sticking with sampling, your concern was that you had to take the initiative to find out what was to be done, as opposed to having had training in it. Is that the point? Yeah,
but that system was in place before I came. The actual where to test and who was testing, but I changed who was testing to DMA.
Right. I think I've possibly got enough.
Yeah, well, I might try to tie that down just a little bit more. The type of sampling that you're talking about, would that have been Legionella sampling?
Correct.
And you mentioned that from your perspective, suboptimal method of having GGC staff carry out the tests and you not being sure whether it had been done, or not carrying out tests, but carrying out the sampling, the drawing of the water, and you not being satisfied that it had been done correctly, continued for a couple of months, and then you got DMA Canyon in to do it.
That's correct, yes, sir.
And I think you said that first couple of months was the first couple of months at your time as being duty manager.
No, it's just the estates man, just the day shift estates manager.
Sorry,
that'd be after May 2017.
Yeah, I got the names the wrong way around, but that puts
Yeah.
us right in the middle of 2017. So
That's correct.
May,
yes.
June, July
Yes, that's
2017 probably,
Mhm.
and then there would have been a shift to getting
Yeah.
DMA Canyon to do it.
That's correct.
How could you be sure that DMA Canyon would do it properly?
Well, they've got the specialist staff to carry it out. Even before I got them to do it, they had to send me across a risk assessment and method statement along with everybody's qualifications who was carrying out the task. And that information will be placed in the Operation Procedures Manual for water systems. So that when the AE came to do the annual audit, that was all there for them to see.
Okay, so at that point, it's seeing the qualifications leaves you satisfied that this is going to be done properly.
Yes, along with the risk assessment and method statement, yes.
Okay, thank you. I think you've said that during your whole time as estates manager, you were involved in arranging for the sampling flushing to be carried out.
Just after May 2017, yes, until I left in, is it April, I think, 2018.
Right. Correct me if I'm wrong. I seem to be garbling when you're duty manager and duty estates manager and estates manager, but estates manager is May 2017 onwards for around 8 months.
That's correct.
And that's the period at which you are instructing the sampling and flushing to be done initially by GGC staff and latterly by DMA Canyon.
That's correct.
Thank you. Can I ask you now about the role of authorised person? Were you ever an authorised person at the hospital?
Yes.
What for?
For high voltage and low voltage electrical and medical gas.
Were you an authorised person for either water or ventilation?
Not at that time, no.
You say not at that time.
That's
Does
correct.
that mean that at some time
Yes.
you were?
For ventilation, yes.
When was that?
That was in 2019. I can't remember exactly the time it was, but it was before I retired in November 2019.
Right, so it follows from that. It wasn't at the Queen Elizabeth.
No,
Right.
no.
Where were you at the time?
RH in Paisley.
Okay. So that was kind of a part of the closing out of your career, was taking on that role.
Yeah, well, I didn't actually finish. I'd done the actual AP course and passed all that, but I didn't get signed off or anything because the time it takes to do that, I'd retired.
And you may have answered already, but what's involved? What's required of you in order to become an authorised person?
You've got to go through an authorised AP course and successfully pass that. Then you'd be nominated to become the AP. That was probably from a senior estates manager. And then the AE would come through and assess you. You'd have to have 6 months to know the system you're going to be an AP for.
Explain that to me.
But you've got to know, if it's ventilation, you've got to know the whole system, how it works. Water would be exactly the same, electrical would be exactly the same, where all the points are for certain points, be whatever it is. You had to, after 6 months, the authorised engineer for that discipline would come in and you'd walk around the site, show them various things, just to make it clear in his mind that you were competent enough to carry out these duties.
I mean, you talk about 6 months. Is that 6 months on the job, 6 months of training courses?
No, 6
of
months. 6 months on the job. Once you've done your AP course, you'd have to learn the system you're an EP for. And that's generally a 6 month period, roughly.
So it's a mixture of a qualification, experience, and actually being assessed as fit to do the role by an authorising engineer.
That's correct.
And you did that for ventilation, but you never did that, you say, for water.
Correct. But you've also got to be authorised by or you've got to be appointed by the board by letter.
Yes.
And it's really up to the person who's been appointed if they want to take that post up.
I wonder at this point I can ask you to take a look at your statement, which will come up on screen. It's question 51 of the statement, which should be at page 186 of the statement bundle. Should come up on the screen in front of you. Now here, the question is, what concerns did you have, if any, about specific roles not being filled? If you heard concerns, did you escalate these? If so, to whom? And you've said, when I moved from the duty estates manager to day shift estates managers, I found out only after I got the job what my duties were going to be. I informed David Bratty I would not be the person responsible for the water system due to my lack of knowledge in this area. However, I would liaise with contractors, DMA, to carry out flushing and sampling in critical areas within the hospital. And then you describe having got a job elsewhere, but obviously there'd been a period of transition between the two roles. There's a suggestion there that you might have been given responsibility for the water system, is the way you've put it.
Well, they tried to give me it.
Well, first question is that the same as being authorised person?
It can't be the same because you've got to do the training first. You've got to go through the process I just explained. You can't just it can't be delegated, that position. In fact, that statement's actually in SHTM for any of the disciplines.
Okay, well, let me ask the question in a different way then. Firstly, who did that suggestion of you getting responsibility for the water system, who did that come from?
I was never told by anyone. It was just assumed by people coming in like DMA Canyon and the E for water. Just assumed I was AP. You just can't assume that.
Well, you've said there that you informed David Bratty that you would not be the person responsible for the water system due to what you consider to be a lack of knowledge in the area. Presumably someone had suggested to you that you might be the person responsible.
Yes.
Who was that?
It was the compliance manager, Phyllis Urquhart, says, I remember the first day that went on to day shift. That was the 1st of May, actually, it was. And the Monday morning, it was put to me that you'll be having an audit for water on Thursday of the same week, after being in the position for 4 days. I just said no.
Right. So from everything you've just told us, that would have been an absolute no-go possibility.
How could it be a possibility?
And this was the compliance manager who put that to you?
Correct.
Who was the compliance manager?
Phyllis Urquhart.
Sorry?
Phyllis Urquhart.
Thank you.
And your reaction that you record there of having informed David Bratty that you won't do it, did you say the same thing to Phyllis Urquhart? Or in fact, how did it come about? I mean, I had the impression it was a one-to-one conversation between you and her. That might not be correct. How did the suggestion come about?
Well, it was one-to-one. She's going to an open planned area. I used to occupy as the estates manager with other estates managers from the retained site, and it was just, the door was opened, and it was. In fact, it might have not been a raised voice, but it might have been just between me and Phyllis, and that was suggested to me that you would get an audit from the AE for water.
And that was specifically in order that you could be appointed authorised person.
No. An audit's no. An audit's you are the EP. You were getting audited.
Oh, as if you were,
yes,
yeah,
that's
as if
correct.
you already
Yes.
were.
No. You were getting audited.
Okay, so you had to inform her that I am not that person.
If the person's a compliance manager, should not know.
Can perhaps be asked of her in due course, but I'm interested in your response to her.
I just said it wasn't AP for water, and it wasn't my audit because I was only in the position at that time for 1 day, but 3 or 4 hours.
So in any event, there was the distinct impression somewhere across across the hospital that you were the authorised person, but that wasn't correct.
That's correct.
Now, Ian Powrie's already given evidence, and he said at one point that Tommy Romeo, due to staff changes, was brought in to be AP nominate. And Tommy raised with me the fact that he hadn't been trained and that he would do what he could, but hadn't the training behind him. Is that an entirely different exchange?
I don't remember having that conversation with Ian.
It's at least consistent with what you've just told us about about the position you took with Phil Circuit. Is that correct?
Sorry, say that again. Sorry.
It's at least consistent with what you
Yes,
say the
yes.
position actually was.
Yes.
So that exchange might have happened, but you just can't remember it.
With Ian Powrie?
Yes.
No.
Are you able to give me a reference for Mr. Parry? You may not.
I am not, I'm afraid. Mark.
Right.
It was during his oral evidence. And when you said that you wouldn't be doing these things, how was that received?
Not very well.
Explain.
Well, I think at the time it was said that, who's your line manager? And I says, David Baratti. So fellas went to see David Baratti and obviously says what Ad says. And he just come in and said, well, we'll help whatever we can. And that's fine, that's fine. Help whenever you can, but you're not, you can't accept that role and responsibility if you haven't had the appropriate training. You just can't accept it.
Okay, so what you are describing at your answer to 51, is that the exchange that you had with Dave Bratty after Phil Circuit had gone to him?
Correct.
Okay, and as you put it, you do what you can, but you weren't taking on that role?
Absolutely. I would do tasks for the senior estates managers, infection control, and microbiology, but I would do it through DMA Canyon, because they're the specialists. I'd just be the middle person.
In practical terms, did it mean that you were carrying out the same functions as you would be had you been authorised person?
No, you wouldn't have the responsibility.
Setting that to one side, in terms of the things that you were actually doing.
No, wasn't it the same? I don't think it was the same anyway.
Okay, explain to me what you have in mind there.
Well, you'd have to know the whole system and how it operates. You'd have to be assessed by AE for that particular discipline. You can't just be an AP without going through the correct channels.
No, I appreciate that, but in terms of what you were doing day to day, which, as you say, is on the middle tier of the...
Well, I was only doing the flushing, sampling and testing for the critical carriers. That's all I was doing. But later on that changed when I got some tasks from the three persons I just mentioned earlier on there. That'd be the infection control, senior estates managers and microbiology. If they asked me to carry out or to get samples or testing for a particular organism or whatever, then I would get the MA Canyon in to carry out that appropriate test. And the results would come back to me and I would send them on to whoever asked for the results.
Okay, and that continued during your remaining 8 months at the hospital?
That's correct.
And during that 8 months, was your tasks entirely to do with flushing and sampling, or were there other things as well?
There was other things. I think there was, if I remember correctly, there was, I think it was it February or January 2018, where they had an incident with the Cupra Vadis came up, which is something we don't generally test for in water. So I had to learn as I was going along about the water. It was like a crash course, you know.
Can you tell us any details about that Cupra Vadis testing? When was it? Where was it in the hospital?
I think that was it was the beginning of February, was it? March. I think it was late February, early March, I think, the 3rd. It was actually, was it Dr. Inkster asked me to ask Damie Canyon to get a sample. I don't know how they're obviously doing sampling in the labs that we don't know about. They're doing a lot of stuff we don't know. They don't come back with something, they tell me to test for Pseudomonas or something, whatever it is, without having a reason. We don't have to know that reason, we just have to test for it. So I don't know where Dr. Inkster would be the best person to ask about that one, if I'm being honest with you. I wouldn't know.
Was there any particular location that you had to carry out that testing?
It was 2A.
Okay.
But if I remember right as well, as a wee kind of add-on, there was something found in 2016 in the aseptic suite. There was an outbreak of Cupra vadis there in 2016.
That was when you were doing the other job of the duty manager.
No, that was something that just came up in 2018. I don't know, you just get told about that. And there was an incident in 2016, so that came back.
Right, it wasn't anything you'd had?
No,
anything to do
nothing.
with.
No,
Okay.
no.
Okay, that's fine. I suppose just to go back to the position about being or not being an authorised person, and you're quite clear that that was never a possibility, that you could have filled that role. Can I ask you, in that case, who did have responsibility for the water system?
In the absence of that authorised person, it would be the responsible person.
Do you know who that was?
Sorry, you carry on, Ms. McKee.
Who was that at the time?
At the time before he retired, it was David Baratti. Now, I'm not too sure if he'd AP training either, but I think he go down the heresy, then that's how it goes, isn't it? I've seen a written plan, and that's kind of how it goes. I think Ian Powrie was in that chain as well somewhere, isn't he? Or,
we may simply not know, in which case I'll move on.
As you say, there's a hierarchy of responsibility.
correct.
And if I'm remembering correctly, the responsible person is above the authorised person.
Correct.
Yeah. Now, you are not the authorised person.
No.
I think you were asked the question is, who was the authorised person?
I didn't know there was one. Sorry, did you ask that question? I do apologise.
Maybe that's what you said, and I didn't. And as far as David Baratti is concerned, you assume he was the responsible person, or you knew he was the responsible person?
At that point, I just assumed.
You just assumed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Obliged, my lord. Just at this point, the exchange I was referring to from Ian Powrie should be found at page 64 of his transcript.
64 in his witness statement.
Of his transcript, it was part of his oral evidence.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Just to finish the thought about authorised person or no authorised person, as the case may be, was that a matter that provoked some concern with you?
Yes, because I think you've got to have one in place.
Did you ever raise that or talk about it with your colleagues?
At that time, I was only there myself because the duty managers were not day shifts. You hardly ever see them. They were firefighting all the time as well. So it's difficult to make. And another thing as well, we're all going through degrees as well at that point. The whole 5 is we're going through degrees. So with that added pressure as well.
And do you feel, looking back, that was a matter you ought to have raised with somebody?
Well, I definitely raised it with David Baratti, yeah.
Specifically, that there should be an authorised person for water and there isn't. Is that what you're talking about?
No, I didn't say that. I just says that I'm not appropriately trained to be an EP. Indicating that somebody had to be appropriately trained to be an EP.
But you didn't do any more than that?
I didn't do any more than that, no.
And looking back, do you feel that you might have, or that you perhaps should have done more than that?
It's difficult for someone who's not a senior estates manager to tell a senior estates manager how to do his job. You'd have thought they would possibly know.
But does it follow from what you're saying that if he did know about the requirements to have an authorised person, then he would have gone about appointing somebody?
Well, you've got to know your staff, haven't you? You've got to know their capabilities.
But in any event, you didn't feel in your position that this was a matter that you should be pushing upwards?
No.
Were you worried that there might be any consequences or unpleasantness if you had done that? Or was that not something that was on your mind?
It wasn't on my mind. I generally just say what I thought anyway.
Thank you. At this point, I'd like to bring up a document from Bundle 6, page 122, and that should be the 2015 DMA Canyon Legionella Risk Assessment Report. Now, as I understand it from your statement, you are saying, I think that you would have seen this document around the time it was issued, which would be April or May of 2015. Is that correct?
No. Did I say that? Sorry.
Well, perhaps you can tell me, you can make it clear exactly what your position is then. It's question 81 of the statement, which will be page 198 of the statement bundle. Now, as I'd read this, question 81, when did you first become aware of this report? You're saying you remember when Colin Purdon received the water risk assessment draft.
Well, that was a kind of mix up there. That was because it doesn't say what year it was. So I'm just surmising because I got the 2017 risk assessment done. That's been Colin Purdon says that 2015 I was not involved in water, so I've never seen that until I seen it as through this.
Okay, that's entirely my fault. That's I was aware that I might be reading that particular question the wrong way, so thank you for clarifying that. But just to put it beyond doubt, the 2015 report that was up on the screen a moment ago, if we could have that again, this report you didn't see until when?
I've never seen that report until I got it in the bundles. I've never seen it.
So until about a week ago, perhaps.
Yeah. Because I have no cause to look at it.
And the reason for that is?
It's not within my remit. I'm not the AP for water.
Do you know anything about that report? Do you know what's happened to it or what was being done with it after it received it? Or is that just something you're not cited on at all?
I'm not cited on at all, to be honest with you.
Okay. Right, if we can perhaps move on then to page 416. It's a different report. And if we see the dates at the bottom here, do we see this is also on Legionella risk assessment, but it's from 2017. And is this the one that you were referring to, or that it's,
yes,
from your perspective, question 81 was about?
Yes.
Okay, so at your answer to 81, you say you remember when Colin Purdon received the water risk assessment draft. Can you remember the date or when that was, or is that not something that's in your mind?
Well, I think it carried out, it says it was completed on the 8th of September. That would be about right, I think. I got DMA Canyon in to talk about the flushing, the sampling and testing of the critical care areas. When I think it was Alan McRobbie, I made an appointment to speak to him about this, and he told me that the 2015 risk assessment is now 2 years old, so you really had to get a new one to make sure you're complying.
Right, could we perhaps bring the statement bundle back on screen just now. And just to bring us back on track, this is your answer to question number 82. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so the question there, just beyond doubt, was were you aware of the 2015 report being discussed prior to 2017? And you say no until the meeting you had with Alan McRobbie.
Correct. You mentioned it to me.
Okay, if we can flip back to the 2017 report, please.
Sorry, again, just to make sure I'm keeping up. Am I right in thinking that round about September 2017, you became aware of the fact that there had been a previous DMA Canyon risk assessment? Have I understood that, or am I wrong about that?
It was a bit earlier than that, my lord. It was when I got them in to inquire about getting them to do sampling and flushing and testing.
Right. So that was before
That
September.
was. I've got a letter. It was dated July 2017. That's when I got them in. Well, that's when I got the quote to carry out the work for the flushing, sampling and testing.
Right. So in July 2017, you became aware of the fact that DMA Canyon had carried out a risk assessment 2 years earlier.
Correct.
Right. Did you do anything with that piece of information?
No.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Right, again, it may be the way I've read the statement, so you can perhaps put me right with this question. But I had taken the understanding to be that you considered yourself to have brought about the 2017 risk report because you had acquired that knowledge.
That's correct.
Relating to the 2015 report being out of date. Is that your position?
That's correct. As soon as I heard it was out of date, I took a note of it, and once the meeting was over with Alan McRobbie, I spoke to Colin Purdon, because getting a risk assessment that was beyond my pay scale. I couldn't authorise that. What's called, you call it raising a PO number. That's a authorisation number. It's a
okay.
an order code you get, and that allows the contractor to carry out the work, knowing they're going to get paid for it.
Right. So in fact, you did something. You spoke to Colin Purdon about updating the DMA Canyon.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, tell me if I'm wrong.
Oh, you're right, because it was out of date, but yes.
So, July 2017, aware of a previous DMA, you became aware, because you were asking DMA, can you do something different? You became aware that they had carried out a risk assessment 2017. In 2015, that had not been updated. You drew the fact that it had not been updated to the attention of Colin Purdon. Have I got that right?
That's correct, only because David Bratty at that time had retired, I think.
Okay.
And Colin was taking over a lot of duties as well as his own, so.
Sorry, Mr. McKee.
Okay, so it follows from that as far as you're concerned, the idea to do the 2017 risk assessment was effectively your idea. Just from your perspective.
Yeah, I suppose. Well, anybody else had done the same thing as I did,
Well, that's kind of comes on to my next question, which was that we heard some evidence yesterday about there being an audit carried out in May 2017. And at that audit, the out-of-dateness, put it with that, of the risk assessment was drawn up as being a matter requiring immediate attention. Might it be that brought about the 2017, the instruction to do a 2017 risk assessment?
No.
So,
because I never see the audit. I never ever seen a copy of that audit. I know Dennis Kelly says he sent emails to me. They never sent me an email at all.
might it be that somebody else was also putting in place
But
the
it did state
arrangements
they
to
sent me
carry
an
out?
email, but it did state they sent me an email and they didn't.
Okay, well, I'll leave that there, I think.
And the way it came across with his assessment of the audit, as if I was the person doing the work to that standard. And how could it have been I was only in the position for 4 days?
Well, perhaps I'll look at something similar in this 2017
Yep.
report itself, because I think you're aware that there are references to you in it. There is, just give me a moment, please. I've rather backed into this set of questions. If we look at page 597, we see here there's a recording of a meeting in January 2018 that you were at, along with representatives from DMA and from GGC. And we see midway down there the paragraph beginning, the Estates Manager. The Estates Manager, placed in the role of AP Water, in quotes, has not undergone any training in Legionella control or other bacteria and has limited knowledge of the water systems on site and the requirements of LH, HSG 274 and SHTM 0401. Do you understand that to be a reference to yourself?
Yeah, but it shouldn't have been there, but who made the assumption it was AP?
Well, that was my next question. Is that fair comment?
No.
Why would DMA have been under the impression that you were carrying out the role of AP Water, quotes?
Because I was probably calling them out to do the job, the work. But getting a contractor to do a job for you doesn't make you're totally responsible for the job you're getting carried out.
On the next page, 598, there's a list of summaries of management tasks required for compliance. And then I make it the 8th box down, but the one certainly that reads regular review of staff training requirements and update training matrix. You see you're mentioned in the narrative on the right-hand side of this.
Sorry, how far down is it? Sorry.
Should be the 8th row down, and it's the box. They all begin regular, unfortunately, but this one is regular review of staff training requirements and update training matrix. And then 4 lines to the right, staff training is responsibility of Joe McKelvey, training manager. Estates then allocate jobs based on core competencies. Presumably, there's no problem with that part of the narrative so far, is that right?
Yep.
And then, however, Tommy Romeo has been allocating water PPMs for approximately 18 months without authorised person training. Now, the implication from that seems to be that the work you were doing was work that required AP training.
Unless the people doing the work were trained competently enough. That's why I got them in to do the work.
There might be a distinction to be made between actually doing the work, going out and taking the samples, screwing things in, fixing whatever it might happen to be, and the other task, which is allocating the work, making sure that the work goes to the right people, is allocated appropriately. Might it be that that narrative that I've just read is focused on the second part of that, and that DMA Canyon are drawing attention to the fact that you are carrying out these tasks of allocation, but that those are tasks which ought properly to be done by someone with authorised person training? Would that be a fair reading of that?
If I'm asked to do a task and I get the appropriate people in to do the task, I don't think it makes me an AP. If the people doing the task are appropriately trained.
Yeah, I'm not trying to make any criticism of you in having read that out.
Yeah.
It's my simple point is that the implication of what DMA have said there is that you were undertaking tasks at a level that were beyond your training because you were not authorised person trained.
Yeah, but it wasn't 18 months because I wasn't there for 18 months. It's only there for 8 months. So I've not got that right.
But otherwise, would that
Yep.
be perhaps
Yep,
a fair
absolutely.
comment?
Yep.
And when we get to that point, does it follow that that's a matter that's concerning?
It would be concerning if you think the right people are to do the job. But you should still have an AP in. Absolutely. Yes, of course you should.
So again, the feeling is there should be an authorised person.
Absolutely.
The work might still be getting done, but the actual administrative arrangement is not right.
Correct.
And you'd accept that.
Yes.
And if we zoom out a little more, might it be that, is this painting a picture? No, sorry, I didn't literally mean zoom out a little bit more. Thank you. Somebody's listening to me. But if we look a little bit more at the big picture, the implication might be that, in actual fact, as DMA are assessing things, they have identified that perhaps nobody at the hospital is clear as to what the responsibility for the water system demands.
Yes. That was one of my reasons for getting DMA to do all the work, because they're totally qualified, and that's one of my reasons for getting them in. In the absence of an EP at that moment in time, I thought it was the best way to go.
Yep. I appreciate that in terms of doing the actual tasks, but in terms of administering, managing, allocating and so on, DMA, that's the gap that DMA are identifying here. Is that fair?
Yeah. Even though they're doing the work. They thought it was a problem, they shouldn't have done the work then.
And just as a last question then about that report, you instructed it. It came back to you in the first instance. Is that correct?
The draft, I think it came back to me and I gave it to Colin Purdon, or asked Alan McRobbie to give it to Colin Purdon, because at that time he was a responsible person and he was also paying for it, because it was beyond. I couldn't sanction that.
I think in fairness, you've said you've been quite open in your response that in actual fact, when you got it, you passed it on, but you didn't read it yourself.
Correct. And it was only the draft form. I didn't know if that was the final document. Well, it wasn't the draft. I don't know whether it's going to be changed. There's not much point in reading something. If something changed and you act on something that's been changed,
Okay, well, be that as it may, looking back, was that the right thing to do? Was that acceptable to pass it on but not look at it yourself?
I should have read it if I had the time. I probably didn't have the time.
Were you at least aware of what was in it?
No, it wasn't. Because I was expecting, when that was something like that, I was expecting the senior managers to look at it and then from that drop an action plan. I could have been involved in that. I could have been involved in it, but still wasn't an EP. You're still going to get the same problems you're speaking about earlier on. But I could have been involved at a later stage. I don't think at that stage. I think that would go higher up. We'd be looked at then. I could be involved later on.
Okay, well, you did pass it on to Colin Purdon.
Yes.
Are you aware of what happened to it after that?
No.
Are you aware of anything that came about as a result of it?
As I was saying, that could have been going in the background with senior managers that I'm not privy to. And I don't know how high up the ladder it's going. I'll only know when it comes back down again.
Well, tell me about it coming back down again. Did you see it coming
That was just a metaphor. Sorry, I didn't. Generally speaking, the things you only hear things when they want you to do something. Sometimes you don't know the background for it. But I was just saying that.
Okay, so you would continue to get tasks, but whether those tasks came about as a result of the 2017 report, you don't know.
I don't know. Correct.
Okay.
I think, to be fair, when the final document came out with that, It was April 2018. No, I know my name's on that, but I think I was away at that time. I think I was away to RH in Paisley by that time. But I know my name. I know it says I got it on the 4th. Then I got the final one on the 24th. But if I was in the RH in Paisley,
Okay, no, I'm perhaps less concerned about the actual document itself and about the tasks that might have come about as a result of that document. So if, for example, it recommended that certain things be done, then it would have, as you put it, would have gone up the ladder or up the chain. Somebody would have made a decision that these were things that should be done. They'd come back down the chain, and you might have got some of those tasks. Is that how it might have worked?
I would have expected an action plan coming down for that once it's been, everybody said that their say at a higher level, it would come back down as an action plan. If somebody would probably get a task to drop an action plan from it once it'd all been agreed and finalised. You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't put an action plan up for a draft. You'd do that for a final document. I'd expect an action plan to come from that.
So that was the specific thing you'd expect to have seen, a formal document, an action plan, but you never saw that.
Never saw that, no. And the written scheme as well probably would come out with that as well, because it'd have to be updated for the previous one if there was any change, the 2015 one.
And you never saw that outcome either. But in fairness, you did leave QH.
That's correct, yes. Yes,
Okay, just to close off the documents, bundle 8 now at page 169. Should be 169, sorry. Now, this is a document titled NHGGC QHRHC Review of Issues Relating to Hospital Water Systems Risk Assessment. Have you seen this document before, other than over the past week or so?
Over the past week or so. Can I make a wee point on this one, if you don't mind? Is this Jim Leaper's?
Yeah, that was my.
I remember he came in 2017. I can't remember what date it was, and I didn't know what this was all about. It was the HFS, wasn't it? They came in to do, I don't know what they were. I didn't even realise it was for.
When you say came in, does that mean for interviews?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Tell me more about that. Did you have an involvement in that process?
I got interviewed.
Okay.
I didn't know what it was for. I wasn't explained to me what it was for.
Can you describe that interview? What did you discuss?
Yeah, I think it was asked for documentation. So the problem is with any external person coming into the NHS, they can't get access. I don't know about now, but they couldn't get access to the computers then, because there's a lock system. They're quite protective about the system in case there's any bugs in it get into it. So they're quite protective about it. And I could understand that. So I think Jim got information off of me, and we gave him information so he could build up his report. And then, but I didn't realise it was about the risk assessment. I thought it was something to do with bullying or something, senior management bullying or whatever. I didn't think it was for risk assessment until I met Jim at something else about 3 weeks ago.
Just hear that. You hadn't appreciated that Mr. Leaper's investigation related to the risk assessment, but you had thought that it was, and I just missed what you said.
I thought it was bullying. Sorry,
bullying.
Bullying, yes.
Oh, right. Oh, I see. I've now got you. Thank you.
But I could be wrong. That was just something that was going about. But I was interviewed, and I don't think a question ever came up, to be honest. Maybe it did. I don't know, but don't know.
Cool. In any event, a series of conclusions, quite a long list of bullets came out of this investigation. The ones you'll be interested in the middle of the next page, page 170. Now, the paragraph beginning, I think it's the 8th one. There was no recommended specific management structure. You see that?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
structure of responsible persons, authorised persons and competent persons in place, and the required levels of training to allow the formal appointments to be made had not taken place. This may have contributed to confusion in roles and responsibilities. I take it you'd agree with that, given what we've discussed.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Then I'll just read the next two paragraphs for you. There's evidence that a review of water systems was taken for the whole QH campus, which included the retained estate and actions arising from the 2015 Elite assessment recommendations, formed part of the resulting action plan after the review concluded around mid to late 2016. Work relating to the action plan was led by Jim Guthrie and subsequently supported by the compliance team until he left his position at QH for a new position in the RAH in February 2017. And then the paragraph you'll be interested in, the responsibility for the action plan was transferred to Tommy Romeo when Jim Guthrie went to the RAH. There was a handover between Jim and Tommy, but Tommy's area of expertise was in electrical systems and was relatively inexperienced in water systems at that time, and he had not received any formal training in water systems. Can you comment on that paragraph, please?
Now, is this the action plan from 2015? Risk assessment, I take it that's the action plan from that?
It appears to be, on my reading of the bullet point above, putting together the dates of February 2017 when Jim Guthrie left and the pass on to you.
Yeah, so it took 2 years to make an action plan.
I'm not asking for your comments on the action plan. I'm asking for the comments in that last bullet that I read out about responsibility for the action plan being transferred to you from Jim Guthrie.
Never seen it.
You don't agree with that?
Well, I don't recall seeing the action plan.
You didn't see the plan at all?
I take it this is the handover when I came on to day shift.
I can't answer that, but you can comment on what
well,
you
if he's leaving in February 2017 to go to the RH in Paisley, I took over his job. By the time I took over his job, I didn't realise I'd be the AP for water. I wouldn't have took his job over. Now, it's 2 years after the Elliott risk assessment.
Excuse me, just for a moment there. Do you know that he was AP for water, or is this an assumption you're making now or at the time? Or is it matter? You still don't know, but you're assuming on the basis of what you're reading here. So it's too long a question. Yeah. You mentioned that you didn't know at the time that Jim Guthrie was an authorised person for water. Do you know that he, do you know that he was an authorised person for water?
I've seen it through the written scheme. On one of these, it was 2016. There's the authorised person, he got it in writing. I'm saying it retrospectively. I didn't know at the time there. This was says, but I've never seen this document anyway until about 2 weeks ago or something.
Okay, well, putting aside the fact that you haven't seen it, the fact that it says responsibility for the action plan was transferred to you from Jim Guthrie, is that something you just disagree with?
I don't recall seeing action plans, I disagree with it. I mean, what I would say with that is he had anything else over, or just the action plan?
Well, it does mention a handover between Jim and Tommy, and I think you said there was a handover when you took over his old job. I'd be interested to know what your memory of the handover was. I
think it was over a 5-day period the handover was, and it wasn't just water, he was doing some ventilation as well and medical gases. In between reactive jobs within that 5 days, so it probably was only 3 days. If you had all the time you had to go and do reactive work.
Okay, and some of that was about water, is that right?
And some was about ventilation, some was about medical gases, yeah.
But if it was about an action plan to do with water, that wasn't something that you were aware of.
That's correct. I don't recall seeing it.
Okay, thank you. The last section of my questions will be about some specific events that you might recall from your time at the hospital. The first of those relates to Ward 2A. I wondered if I can prompt you if you can have your statement up before you again, and it will be question 73 at page 193 of the bundle. 193, yes. So if you see question 73 there, it's a general question with many heads about sterilisation of water systems. Do you see that?
Yes,
And then your answer at the foot is that about how you remember an particular instruction from Ian Powdy in infection control for water system sterilisation at Ward 2A. Now, this particular instruction, can you remember when it was?
this for disinfecting the lines. The actual
Well, perhaps if I just read
sterilisation.
out the full answer
Yeah,
then, rather than
flushing,
having you
sampling.
try to read an answer at the same time. I remember being instructed by Ian Powdy in infection control to get RHC W2A, Ward 2A water system sterilisation. As a result, I got DMA Canyon to carry out sterilisation. They were already carrying out flushing and sampling within the hospital. At the time, I was day shift manager, June 2017 onwards, presumably for 8 months. The method they would have used would have been in the form of a risk assessment and method statement, which would have been given to Mr. Powdy in infection control to look over and make sure it met all compliance requirements. Only once the process was accepted by Mr. Powdy, infection control and ward area manager, would the work be carried out. I'm not sure of the outcome, as the results and documentation were sent to Mr. Powdy, infection control and the ward area manager. Okay, first question is, when did that instruction come?
I think it was early March 2018.
That, is my memory correct, that would be right before you left the hospital?
Yes, yes.
And the answer may be the same as you gave me earlier, but what was the route by which a task like this would come about?
From Ian Powdy in infection control, but mainly from Ian Powdy would ask me to get DMA in to do the job. But that would have came from infection control or microbiology to Ian Powdy.
And we're talking about a direct specific instruction given to you, not something that would go onto the computer system that you...
That's correct,
described.
yes, that's
Okay.
correct. Because it would go into an external contractor. So we put on FM first. Really, that's only for internal work to be carried out, the FM first.
Do you know what prompted that instruction?
As I said earlier on, I think that infection control microbiology are doing things behind the scenes and they maybe test for something because something came up, but sometimes they don't tell us. You just go and tell us to do sampling for a certain microorganism and then you just go and do the task. Sometimes you're not told the reason why or what's come up until you maybe hear about it maybe 4 or 5 weeks later if you're in one of the meetings. And I think that was possibly the case in this. I think it was a meeting. Was it on the 1st of March? I remember being to 3 meetings regarding this. I think it was the 1st, the 6th, was it the 9th of March? Only attended 3. Maybe I got the dates from, there's only 3 anyway, attended, but it was quite early on in March. And I think this could potentially be a result of that.
Okay, but that anchors it quite firmly in your mind as being in March 2018, is that
Yeah,
right?
so it was only, yes. So there's risk assessments and all that had to be produced by, as I mentioned there, DMA Canyon. And that had been logged in the operation procedure manual for water, Or even it might have been under sterilisation or flushing or something. It might have been under that particular envelope of that, the binder it was in, because we had them on binders. But because DMA were doing the job, they'd be electronic as well, so that'd been a shared drive. It's in the hospital shared drive. Okay. So it'd be electronic as well as hard copy. Okay,
what I have in mind is that part of the hospital had a concern about Pseudomonas infections earlier than that, in July, the middle of the previous year, July 2017. And I was going to suggest it might have been around that time. Might that be correct? Or
I'm not too sure, to be honest with you. I'm not too sure. So it's nothing to do with Cupravadis then?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, I don't know. Sterilisation.
So my follow-up questions would have been, this is an instruction on sterilisation. I was going to ask you if, given my suggestion that it might have been to do with the centrifugal matter in July 2017, can you remember whether the sterilisation took place before or after those concerns?
I'm not sure. I can't answer that, to be honest with you. I don't know.
Sorry, the question is before or before. Before. Okay, I've got a problem at the moment. Carry on.
Right. Well, to anticipate what the question might have been, you were quite firm initially that the instruction to sterilise the system at Ward 2A was March 2018. My suggestion to you thereafter was it might have been around July 2017 when there was a concern about stentor pulmonis. And I think you backtracked slightly and you can't be sure it was one or the other.
Yeah, but the reason for backtracking this a bit is because I don't know if DMA were then doing the sampling and testing in July. Because I just had a meeting with them in July. I wasn't too sure if it was quickly activated for them to carry out the sampling and testing in July. If it was very, give myself a pat in the back. It was as quick as that, to be honest with you. So I'm not too sure.
Well, that may also bear upon my next question, which was, if we go on a few pages in the statement to page 199, there was some other work at the foot of this page, question 86, detailed around Ward 2A. So here, if you look at that, you start off by, again, referring to their assumption that you would be in the AP for water. But you say, as a result, I got DMA to carry out flushing, sampling within critical areas and later to thermally disinfect the taps in Ward 2A, straighteners and replace straighteners as instructed. Is that as instructed as a result of what was in the 2017 DMA report?
No, I think it was to do with, again, I think it came down from Ian Powry, but I think it came down from microbiology because they found something else. And I think they discovered, I think we took a tap, I think it was asked by Dr. Inkster to take a tap apart and send up parts of that tap, but the straightener and the strainer and the whole unit itself when it was tested. And I think they found, I wasn't aware of really what they found, but they found things in it to give them cause for concern. They wanted them all thermally disinfected.
Okay, I'll perhaps come back to the tap issue in a moment. The part I was interested in was the next sentence, or the last sentence here. They also changed the end-of-line filter and replaced the shower hoses and nozzles monthly in Ward 2A. Can I ask you what prompted that to be done? The changing monthly of the shower hoses and nozzles? Do you know?
I'm not too sure because I remember I was asked to get two different types of end-of-line filters and showers, end-of-line for the showers as well. And I think all the documentation I got, PAL filters, I could be wrong, but I thought it was something like 90 days you got with them. Or if you used the other ones, I can't remember the name of the other ones, you would get 30 days. I think the NHS opted for the PAL filters, but change them every month anyway.
Okay, I perhaps put the cart before the horse there. First question should have been, can you remember when that was done, when you started replacing the shower hoses and nozzles?
That was done after all the taps were thermally disinfected.
Can you give a month estimate for that?
No, is that long? Well, I can't remember, but before April.
Before April 2018.
No, that's what I left.
Clearly.
Yeah.
The concern I mentioned about centrifugal cases in July 2017, might it have been around that time?
July 17? No.
Later than that.
It was definitely in 2018. Because it says the end-of-line filters get put on after the taps were thermally disinfected. I think the end-of-line filters were, I'm not saying the last resort was. Well, it wasn't, because they decanted the 2A patients and put them into 6A, wasn't it? But I wasn't there at that time. I'd left by that time. But that's what happened. That was spoke about.
Okay, I'll perhaps leave that then for the moment. The next specific question I was going to ask you about was an issue with the bypass at the very start of occupation of the hospital in April 2015. Can we go back a few pages in the statement to page 194? And the full page is about, you may remember this, it's about an account by Ian Powrie of water supply being lost. And to resolve the issue, water to bypass the filtration plant and feed on tanks with mains water. He further tells us that you supervised the manual fill. And you've said, your first answer, very candidly, as Mr. Powrie said it happened, then I've no doubt it did. But you can't remember the incident.
No,
and
I can't.
You still can't remember the incident.
Still can't. I even seen Ian's statement as well, and everything he mentioned in his statement. I know Ian for a number of years now, and that's exactly what I thought he would do, what he says in his statement, but I can't remember it. At that time, we were dealing with people getting trapped in lifts, we're dealing with pneumatic system, dealing with sewage coming up into certain areas of the hospital. Fire alarms going off because people using deodorants in the toilets. So it was constant, it was just firefighting all the time.
Right, that was, you're anticipating my question to you, which is that his account is seems fairly memorable to me, in that the water supply going down, a threat to the water supply to the hospital, everyone at the end of long shifts, and so on, and just the two of you to install the bypass. My question would have been, how come you can't remember that when it seems memorable to me, but you're...
But you're not doing all the jobs I was doing. That's the only thing I can think of. I mean, I'm not disputing it happened, that's for sure. And the actions Ian Powrie gave us in his statement when he was doing it, I was watching it, and everything he says he did, I can imagine him doing. That's kind of the person he is, you know.
Does it follow from that that you can't remember the incident and you therefore won't be able to remember what happened next? What was the outcome of the bypass? What happened to it after you put it in?
No.
Okay.
But I do know over the times, after that, when we got the tanks tested at various times, it was always clear.
The last set of questions I was going to ask you about, and you may have covered some of it already, but it's a few matters around taps, and this will be on the next page. I think you've got a section 75 to 77 is about taps. First, question 75 is about horn taps, horn optotherm taps, I think they are, to give them their full name. Are you familiar with those items? Can you describe them?
Yeah, they're thermal mixing taps or thermal mixing valves. But the ones here are thermal mixing taps, I think they're referring to, you know.
You're aware that their use in the hospital came to be questioned?
I was aware after the event, after them being installed. Does that mean when at certain parts? I wasn't aware before they were installed there would have been an issue.
Okay, you became aware that there had been a specific incident in Northern Ireland in which their use...
No, I wasn't.
Your answer to B, midway down the page, I think explains the position. The only incident I recall from Northern Ireland was during the cupravidis outbreak, when I asked Dr. Inkster for guidance on how to treat this water issue, and her reply was send you a document relating to the case, which you didn't find very helpful.
See, I don't think, probably the two of them are not the same. That's the only thing I can remember from Northern Ireland was the document I got from Dr. Inkster. But I don't know if it's relating to the one above it, the question actually in B. I don't know if it's relating to that. I don't know if it is or not.
Okay, fine. Slightly differently, we might hear from another witness that you were asked by Dr. Peters within the hospital for assistance in dealing with horn taps in early 2018. Do you recall that?
What kind of assistance?
Well, specifically that you might have been asked by her to help out with opening up the taps.
Yeah, we sent them up for the lab yes.
Specifically by getting an Allen key to open up the tap.
Yeah, but wouldn't it be in the ward? It'd be outside. It would be outside the ward. It'd be away from any areas. We'd open it up. When you open it up in the ward, it'd be taken out.
Okay, well, don't let me plant the memory in your head. But do you recall this happening?
Yes,
you and Dr. Peters.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And you got an Allen key to help open up the tap, wherever it was.
Yeah, that wouldn't be me.
And what happened?
The parts were sent up to the lab. I think I said that earlier on. The parts got sent up to the lab, and they were tested.
But I mean, I'm interested even more specifically than that. You were asked to get an Allen key to open up the taps. What happened next?
Well, the taps got opened up, I would imagine.
Well, you got the Allen key, is that right?
I don't think. No, I've not. I wouldn't have Allen keys. Where did this happen? Did it happen in a room or something? Where did it happen? I'm not understanding the question, if I'm being honest with you.
No, what I'm interested in is really probing how much of a memory you have of a specific event. So it's...
I remember the taps being stripped down and sent to the lab for analysis, yes.
And do you remember dealing with Dr. Peters?
I'm not too sure it was. It might have been. I'm not too sure it was in the lab block. I'm not too sure.
And do you remember being asked for an Allen key to open up the tap?
I could have been, yes. I could have been, but yeah.
Can you remember what you said in response to that?
No.
I think you said a moment ago, and perhaps I cut you off, but you said I wouldn't have had an Allen key.
Me personally, no. I wouldn't have had an Allen key, no.
Why not?
Because I'm not in the tools anymore.
Ms. McKeever, what you're, I think, putting to the witness is an instant where Dr. Peters asks Mr. Romeo to dismantle one specific tap. Is that's correct?
Yes, effectively,
Right.
yes.
Now, I had a note that you did remember such an instant, but I may have noted you wrongly.
No, that's right, my lord. I says at one point a tap was stripped down and the straightener and the strainer was sent to the lab for analysis.
Right, and we're talking about one tap.
Yeah, I think it was. It might have been two, I don't know. I can't remember how many there was. I think sometimes they maybe need more than one just to cross-reference.
Yeah, I don't want you to have the impression that I'm speaking about a bigger kind of framework than I actually am. I'm asking about a specific interaction that you'd had with Dr. Peters, whereby you or she would be holding a tap or there'd be a tap on the table. The tap's not open. She wants to get it open. She's asking for an Allen key from you in order to open it. Do you remember that type of interaction?
I think I might now, yeah. I think I might now.
And
I wouldn't have had an Allen key. I had to go ones off or something. I don't carry Allen keys. You don't do that if you're a tradesman. As a manager, you don't carry Allen tools.
do you happen to recall whether you did that, whether you got somebody to get an Allen key?
I might have. But I'm not too sure, to be honest with you. But I know at least one gets stripped down anyway for analysis. For the components inside it, so as they could test them at the lab.
Slightly differently, do you remember that whether those particular taps do open with Allen keys?
can't remember now. You're saying to me that an allocated. I don't know. Being honest with you, I don't know.
Okay, well, if I work on that hypothesis, then if they open with Allen keys, will there be people around to open them up?
Yes, there would be, yes.
Okay, thank you. Coming to the end now, on the next page, there's a question about point of use filters. Do you recall being involved in fitting those?
My memory serves me right. I think we got, was it DMA Canyon to fit them for us, if I remember.
In the last answer on the page, you refer to, if I remember correctly, I was asked to order PAL filters as they could last longer. You think the recommendation was every 3 months. However, you think they were changed every month. Can't be sure, as I was only involved for a short time before leaving the hospital.
Sorry, my fault, Mr. McGarvey. What is the page?
It's page 196 of the bundle, the answer to question 76E.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Now, again, you mentioned something similar, I think, with the shower heads or the shower nozzles, that the specification might have been every 3 months, but the change was in fact done monthly. The part I read out to you is effectively the same thing about the point of use filters.
Yes.
Is that right?
As far as I can call them, I may be wrong, but I'm sure it is something that was like 90 days or something, you know.
Do you know why the instruction might have been given to change them more often?
I don't know if there's any evidence to change them earlier than that. I wouldn't know. That'd be a clinical decision to do that anyway. And you would just, if they asked you to do it, you would do it.
And just to close off, the next page, just at the top, question 77 was about cleaning and maintenance of taps. And you say, early 2018, I organised DMA Canyon to clean the taps under instruction of the senior estate managers and infection control. Once their RAMs, what's RAMs stand for?
Risk and risk assessment.
Were accepted by senior estates managers, infection control and ward area manager, these works commenced. Now that is, you say, early 2018. Where was this? Which taps do you have in mind?
That was Ward 2A. That was the horn taps.
It was the horn taps.
Yes.
Why was this instructed in 2018? Do you know?
I can only assume it was after the Allen key incident, slipping down the tap. Potentially, they maybe found something, I don't know. Sometimes, as I said before earlier, sometimes they don't tell us all the results they get, they just go and tell us to do a task, and you've got to try and work out yourself, was that because of that? Or sometimes you're not told.
Perhaps it passed me by, but can you remind me what prompted the interest in the taps in the first place?
I think they're trying to find out, is it just elimination? Trying to just work things out, what's causing, whatever was causing. Or it could have been a case of that tap being opened, that it found something in it, or they found something that should be trying to clean them all to get rid of whatever was in it. I'm not too sure.
Okay, you don't know which
I don't know, that's correct.
Yeah. Right, but you had been involved in maintenance and cleaning at least since June 2017. I think that was what you told us earlier when you moved to be estate manager.
Yes, it was actually, I think it was May, actually, yeah.
Had the cleaning of taps not arisen before as part of that job?
I'm not sure. Can't recall.
I think that's all the questions I have for Mr. Romeo, my lord. Wonder if we might take a short break at this point.
Shall we take a break? Mr. Romeo, I need to find out whether there's any other questions coming from the floor. So if you'll be taken to the witness room, and I'd hope we could reconvene in about 10 minutes.
Thank you, my lord.
Thank you.
Are we to have more questions?
I have a short list of questions for this.
Mr. Romeo, and there'll be some further questions from Mr. McKeever. Mr. McKeever.
Thank you. A fairly short list of questions for you, Mr. Romeo. The first one is to do with maintenance. Now, you have discussed maintenance quite a lot in your answers to me, for which thanks. A question I wanted to ask you was about where there were, in scenarios where there are specific strategies for maintenance that have been agreed, where would the information be held as to what those specific strategies were?
That could probably in Zootech, probably.
Zootech being?
That's the database where all the commissioning, verification, drawings, specification documents would be held.
And would that be accessible to you or to whoever required to do the maintenance?
Yes. Well, yeah, but it's difficult to find in Zootech. It was not easy to find. You had to be precise with your wording. But there's also, you could also find it in SHTMs if it was like ventilation or water or electrical. I mean, there's still got guidance within them as well.
I have to say, Mr. McKeever, I'm not just absolutely sure what you're comprehending in maintenance strategies.
Maintenance instructions, then, would perhaps be a better way of putting it, my lord. If, for example, there were a piece of equipment, be that a tap, be that a duct, be that whatever, that had a specific method by which maintenance had to be carried out, where would that information be held, and would that be accessible to you?
That would be a specification for a horn tap, say, for talking's sake. Anything.
Any piece of equipment.
Well, it would come with the horn tap when it was installed. So that would all be in Zootech.
Okay. And Zootech is accessible to anyone working in the hospital, is that right? Do you know?
I'm not too sure about anyone, to be honest. I'm not too sure, but definitely for managers it was. But it certainly wasn't the easiest to navigate.
Well, perhaps my asked too broad a question. It would be accessible to you, would that be correct?
Yes,
Next question I had is about the reporting system, HI Scribe. In relation, you spoke about tap work that you carried out in wards 2A or 2B. Did you complete HI Scribes on that work?
Yeah, but that might have been carried out by infection control because they were heavily involved with that. They would have seen a risk assessment from DMA Canyon, and from that risk assessment they would ascertain if a scribe is required or not. And if one was required, they would get one, yes.
Did you ever do one?
For that particular job?
Yes.
I don't recall doing one.
Next, I've got a short series of questions on various aspects of ventilation, which I didn't cover with you to a great extent in your earlier questions.
I mean, would it be, sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Would it be fair to say, Mr. Romeo, that you personally don't know whether an H-scribe procedure was carried out in relation to any work being done on taps?
That's right.
Thank you. Sorry, Ms. McHugh.
Thank you. Yes, a short series of questions on ventilation. You described to us what your tasks might be with the water system in terms of receiving an instruction and getting the work done.
Mm-hmm.
Did you also receive similar sets of tasks in relation to ventilation?
Well, for the air handling units, it's the only thing that I was involved with for doing PPMs. And that all came from the SHTM 0301. And there's a list of things you do. I think it's an appendix. I can't remember which appendix it's in, but it tells you what you've got to do for a monthly inspection, a monthly PPM, 3 monthly PPM, 6 monthly PPM, and a verification for we call isolation rooms and theatre suites. And the last one there I mentioned, that would be carried out by an external contractor. In our case, it was H&V carried that out.
Right. Now, in relation to air handling units, can you recall ever directing the changing of a filter on one of those units?
Well, filter change is part of the PPM. And it's probably, is it a 6 monthly or 3 monthly? I can't remember offhand. There's one of the PPMs that you do change the filters if required. You look at differential pressure and whether that, the engineers know what that drop is, and that will indicate that the filter's near the end of its use.
Can you recall ever actually having to do that, to instruct a filter be changed?
And out of its PPM, no.
I mean, at all, in your dealings with those units.
If a 6 monthly PPM says you change the filters, you change the filters. But I wouldn't, it'd be up to the technician at the time carrying out the PPM.
Did you ever receive an instruction to put a damper on one of the filters?
A damper?
Yes.
I don't understand why you put a damper in the filter.
I'm not sure what a damper
damper
means in
is
this context.
Well, it may be that once I explain, I can't take the question any further. As I understand it, a damper is a kind of reverse valve to stop air from going
You
the,
put on
the
a
wrong way.
the filter's like paper. It's not. Why would you put a mechanical thing on a filter?
My specific question was, can you ever remember such an instruction?
No. I know what a damper is in an air handling unit, but why would you? I don't understand the question, if I'm being honest with you.
Sorry, in that case, it may be my mistake in the way I've asked it. Can you recall any specific instruction to put a damper in an air handling unit?
They're in the air handling units. I don't recall ever getting empty fit one. No.
No, that was my question.
No, sorry.
Thank you.
Okay.
Now, I started out the ventilation section by noting that you had done some similar tasks or tasks of a similar level on some aspects of ventilation as you did for water. But you did tell us quite clearly that at the time you were at QEH, you did not consider yourself suitably qualified to act in the authorised person role. Can I ask you about the authorised person for ventilation role? You were quite clear that you didn't undertake that role when you were at QEH.
That's correct.
Can I ask you whether at the time that you were there, would you have been qualified to undertake that role if it had come up?
Not in the Queen Elizabeth, no.
And just to close off on ventilation, in respect of annual validation checks on the system, do you know whether those were done?
Do you mean validation or do you mean verification?
I think it's verification, I think.
Excuse me, annual verification checks.
On critical air handling units, be it isolation rooms and theatre suites, yes, annually all the time. I was there. The time I was there, they get done, yes.
Who did that?
That was H&V, external contractor.
The last question I have for you relates to testing results in the specific periods of May, June and July 2017, so shortly after you took on the the States Manager role.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall seeing any out of specification water results during that period?
Like for Legionella or Pseudomonas?
For anything?
For anything? Without seeing any records, I couldn't really tell you, but on occasions they were out of spec. But if they were out of spec test results, then we've got a sheet we fill in. It's like an action plan type thing, out of spec sheet. You would send it to the infection control, let them know, and any actions you were taking. But I don't.
The specific question was whether you could recall having received any of these results during that period, and you may not.
I couldn't say.
Would I be right in thinking you would get what you've described as an out-of-spec sheet from DMA Canyon?
No, we would have one myself.
You would prepare
Yes.
one yourself?
Yes.
And you would start with, did you receive results from, let me start again. As I understand it, the results of testing would come from either the health board's own laboratory or an outside laboratory. Is that right?
I think those came from the one at the GRI in Glasgow, I think.
Right. So that would be a board.
That's a board one, yes. I'm
Right,
sure.
okay.
I'm sure it did.
So you would get these
Uh-huh.
routinely,
Yes. Yes. Uh-huh.
and you would prepare what you describe as an out-of-spec sheet.
Yes.
Right. So you're involved in looking at the results and extracting results which are out of specification.
Yes.
Right.
That's correct, my
Thank
lord,
you.
Yes.
Thank you. That was my last question, Lord.
Can I take it that Ms. McKeever has asked such questions as people wish to be asked? Well, I take that as a yes, and therefore, Mr. Romeo, you've finished your evidence and you're free to go. But before you go, can I thank you for coming today, but also for the work involved in preparing your statement. This will be very useful. Thank you.
Thank you, my lord. Thank you.
Thank you much. I think we'll be resuming at 10 o'clock tomorrow is the plan. I understand that Mr. McIntosh would wish to take the opportunity to update legal representatives on witness orders. So I anticipate Mr. McIntosh will have something to say to you. But until tomorrow, have a good afternoon.